to your point, I can appreciate that because at the end of the day, I look at it as tribalism, regardless. Whether your tribe is stateside and it's your hood, or your tribe is Ga, Igbo, Yoruba, whatever the case may be. But I wanted to get a better understanding too for those who have come back because as Quav stated, I'm 100% Ghanaian, but when I show up, I'm American and I'll never be Ghanaian enough. Let's be clear. But I think that, one of the things that I'd like to hear from everyone who has come back is what has been the biggest cultural challenge that you have encountered? What is the transition, the actual transition midlife? Because regardless, I think everybody looks at it as a utopia and we know that it's not that. So what is the biggest challenge in adaptation, learning to integrate yourself into where you currently are?
Let's start on this side.
What I'll say is I'll answer the question in reverse because for me, my first big switch or shock was being born in Ghana and going to the US. And in thinking through your question, there seems to be this perception of Africa that our default is welcoming. The default is it should be comfortable, it should be easy. It's still people. Like whenever we travel, Black people travel, we know that we need to be, cautious, understand the space, and figure out how to integrate. But that is not given to Africa, it feels. And I do understand either African Americans or people who grew up who live longer, they're expecting that this should be home. Going back to the home analogy, it's like my parents invited people over and I'm upstairs playing music and I have to come downstairs and cater to them. I didn't sign up for this. You understand? That's my afternoon gone. So there's a very uneasy conversation that never starts. So already I'm pissed that I'm not watching my favorite TV show because you're talking to my dad and I have to pay attention and paying some interest. And you're looking at me like, why is this kid having an attitude and probably not answering my question and giving you one-worded answers? That's it. The year of return, the government had an initiative, whether good or bad, they had an initiative. We were not consulted on what's the plan. So it feels like, hey, there's this thing happening that's being amplified and people are coming in and why? Yeah, it's like, what's going on? And there's also perhaps a conversation to be had because we said opportunity. And opportunity also, again, it touches to privilege and power, right? Because for the average Ghanaian, anybody coming through the airport, you have access, you have privilege, you have money. That's what most people here are trying to figure out, are trying to build. So already, I see you and it's like, oh shit, that's competition. Or they have something that I don't. Or I'm just trying to survive. And the thing that already feels limited, it seems you have direct access to. So the conversation never really starts. And I get it, but it really does feel frustrating because, again, on the online discussions, we tend to talk across each other. I mean, there's a shared goal, there's a shared desire. I mean, hell, our cultures merge because there's a shared similarity. And I think, if I can cuss, we do fuck with each other. But we never pause enough to have the conversations for us to kind of figure out, oh, maybe want to share or work together, because that's the other thing. The community, the collaboration, it probably gets both of us closer to what we wanted. It might mean I don't get 100% of what I want, but you get closer to your goal, I get closer to my goal, and we are all happy. So if, again, the people in power aren't having this conversation, it probably falls on us to figure out how to have the conversation, but then everybody's pissed and I want
to follow up with that point, though.
Yeah.
Because I think that the point that you're making, the folks are making about the unpreparedness of the Ghanaian people to welcome back folks who have been invited into their house, and your knowledge about you being like the child who your parents forced to help entertain guests against your desires. It's an interesting analogy, but I think the thing that still is true is that your parents invited these people to the home, and that you being rude to them or them behaving in a way that is unwelcoming is not their fault, right? And so I'll push the question further and pick it back on the one you just asked too, is what should the government have done to prepare Ghana and Ghanaian society to welcome folks? I'm going to go to you first on that question, and then you on that. Her first.
I do think that this is a very important conversation, and it's so nuanced, right? And I think a lot of the times when we start this conversation, it's just surface level. African American, they don't get along.
Right.
Which is not true.
Right.
We're all on the same team. That's number one, right? And I think, first of all, we all need to realize that. And I would even say, like, I remember when I first moved to America, right? And I was just quiet because I had a Ghanaian accent. And here, you don't speak until the teacher speaks to you. So I wasn't in class giddy like the rest of the kids, right? So the Black girls in class were like, oh, she's from Africa. She thinks she's better than us. That's why she's not talking. And I was just like, I'm just quiet because I don't really know you that well. And most of the people who were welcoming to me were like the Asians and the Indians in the class because they were also immigrants, right? So we had more in common than the other people in class. But immediately it was assumed she's African, we're African American, and that's why we don't get along, right? So I also then, I was young, so I was very much like, let me become very American. I was in Atlanta, so I started listening to all Goody Mob. I started, trying to talk with a Southern accent. So, because at that age, you want to fit in, right? So you're like, anything to become very American is what I'll do. Then, right, you start getting older, you start coming back home, you start learning more about like the nuances between the two. And you realize in America, they're having conversations about race, black and white. Here, they're having conversations about tribes, right? So I'm Fanti. We don't really have a lot in common with the Ashanti people. And even with my friends, we're having these conversations where I'm like, oh, you guys do that? We don't do that. What do you do at weddings? What do you do at funerals? We're having different conversations. Just because you're coming here as a Black person doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is just like, oh, welcome, because we're not even looking at race relations here. When you're in a country where everyone is Black, you start dividing yourselves by different things. You have socioeconomic statuses, where you've lived, where you've gone to school. So I think the basis of our conversations have always been very different. And then to your point about the government, deciding year of return, we know how marketing works. It's a marketing tool, right? And it's let's welcome African Americans back. And it makes sense. I think it was very important. The timing was perfect. The story behind it. But to your point, how many times does the government ever connect with the locals to make decisions about what would bring in money for the country, right? And then like everyone is saying, you're coming from the airport, they're automatically looking at you like, all right, here comes some money. It's not, how can we like trick African Americans out of their money? It is, survival. You've gone. I haven't been able to go anywhere. You're coming. How can I get what I need to survive? That's it.
Right.
And people take it very personal, which makes sense. You're coming in and you're like, the government has welcomed me here. I should come in and everyone should embrace me and they should be doing the Adwa dance for me at the airport, right? Where the locals are like, what is even happening? Right? To your point, people go to Cape Coast Castle and they're like, who are these people? What are they coming here for? No one had this conversation with Ghanaians that this is what we're doing. This is how we should welcome people. And this is sort of like the narrative that we're sharing outside of Ghana.
Pushing back a little bit and asking, maybe you can answer this, Professor, what should the government have done to prepare the people on the Ghanaian side to deal with the fact that they invited others to come to the home?
Give them more notice.
This notion of welcoming people back home, and the fact that the government did it.
Yeah.
So that was more like tourism dollars, because African Americans have been searching home for since we've been taken.
Yeah.
So how do we have a conversation about a group of people who are stolen from a land in search of home? And that conversation doesn't happen. It becomes interesting over 20 years taking students and watching these clashes. Are you serious? The clashes between students who are freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, with this notion of utopia, or this notion of your booty scratcher, and everything in between. And now coming in contact with people who look like them. And from outside looking in, the tribal stuff seems interesting. But from a lost African, I don't get it, because you do some of the things. Oh, that's where the greens came from. Oh, that's where wait, I do that at home too. Wow. Right? As I'm searching, I'm hurting. We're not taught in America how to talk about that hurt. This hurts, right? So the notion of what the government could have done, government is government. And I tell my students, no different. It's like sometimes it's like, oh, they're doing, no, we're just as corrupt. We trick each other just as much. And so now how do we have a conversation on a human level for people who were stolen and what that means?